Hello everyone, and welcome to, finally, episode 2 of Discovering Steven Universe. Yes, it's been way too long since I put the last video out. It is more than due time to get this ball rolling, and hopefully this will be the second of many to come in the very near future. But today the episode of Steven Universe I'm going to be talking about is obviously the actual second episode, which is called Laser Light Cannon. And as with my Discovering Doctor Who series, let's get started with my favorite parts of this episode. Starting with the fact that we finally meet in the show Greg Universe, Steven's dad, who we had seen in the intro sequence, well, twice at this point before this episode started. And, it's kind of, I guess, assumed that it's Steven's dad beforehand, or maybe it's that, the show's been out long enough that it was kind of told to me through spoilers, I suppose, that Greg was Steven's dad, or that this character was Steven's dad. But finally getting to meet him was interesting. I mean, he's obviously a bit of a slacker, I guess you would say. Apparently lives in his van, doesn't actually have a house, which is, I assume, part of why Steven lives with the Gems as opposed to with his dad. That's one part that I can only assume will be explained as the show goes on. But also, it's shown that Greg has a big heart, which, again, although we're not told much to begin with, you can tell that there's just something about the character that's really endearing, even if he is rather bumbling and kind of goofy in the end, which is obviously part of where Steven got that from. But, more so the silliness and the goofiness. I don't really think Steven's all that bumbling. Maybe I'm wrong or looking at it differently, but yeah, just finally getting to meet the character Greg, I thought was really cool. Oh, and, well, actually, I'll touch on a little bit more of that in one of my upcoming favorite parts. But let's move on to my second favorite part of the episode, which was the Fastball Special. Now, if you haven't seen either some of the X-Men cartoons or movies or the comics, then you might not entirely know what that is. But basically, the Fastball Special, as I'm referring to it here, is when Garnet picks up Amethyst and throws her at the big red eyeball thing. And just, one, it made me laugh because it obviously made me think of Colossus throwing Wolverine, again, with the X-Men. But just what happens every time Amethyst gets tossed is just like, rah! And then it's like, splash. Just something about the way that's timed is just so perfect and hilarious. And the fact that they do it a few more times afterward, and then at one point Amethyst is like, okay, let's try something else. Throw me again. I think it was starting to crack. I really like that part, and I don't know, it's part of the comedy for this show that I'm really looking forward to as we continue on. There's some parts of the comedy that are a bit not so much with me, but I'll touch on that, in some of my annoyances. But my third and final favorite part of this episode, I apologize, my tablet locked up, was the laser light cannon, and just a lot of the stuff that revolved around it. Now, the fact that it opened up and activated on when Steven said his dad's words, which were, if every pork chop were perfect, we wouldn't have hot dogs. That leads me to have a few ideas as to what could be going on there, and actually, did I write down? Actually, I'll include that in one of my theories coming up if I can remember. But just part of how Rose Quartz, Rose Quartz or Rose, something like that, whatever Steven's mom name was, how her relationship with Greg was. Now, the thing that I really enjoyed most about the laser light cannon was how, when it fired, it took on the form of a person, or one of the beams took on the form of a person, which I can only assume was Rose, or Rose Quartz, or whatever, based on, one, how the Gems reacted, and then also, based on kind of the picture that we saw earlier in the episode, but then the way Greg reacted, and this is, going back to him being part of this episode, just, everyone reacted their own way to seeing the beam, seeing what it did, And when Greg saw that, when we see him afterward, like, he's tearing up and he's crying because he saw Rose there. Or he saw the image of Rose. And I don't know, that just made me like his character even more in such a short amount of time, because, again, you can just tell that there's a big heart underneath that balding, bumbling ex-rocker, apparently. But yeah, okay, so those were my favorite parts of the episode. If you have any others, please do let me know in the in the comments down below. Now it's time to get into my annoyances, and overall, I would say these are nitpicks, especially the second one. But yeah, just you might not agree with these, but these are just the way I felt. One thing that annoyed me about the episode is the fact that Steven's mom is just kind of explained away in exposition, with no other information being given to us. Like, after, like while Steven is crawling through the dungeon, or whatever it is, or the dad museum in the storage locker, Greg says something about, that was your mom's before she gave up her physical form for you, or so you could be born. Or something along those lines. Maybe I'm remembering what he said wrong, but that's all we get. It's just like, an exposition is like, yeah, she gave up her physical form so you could be born. What? I mean, again, I can only assume that that's going to be explained as the show goes on. But that's a lot to just kind of dump all of a sudden and not expect... Well, again, they may have done it on purpose. But for me, it was just like... His mom gave up her physical form? What? Why? How? Why are you telling me this in the second episode? So yeah, that just kind of drove me nuts. Again, probably a bit of a nitpick, but again, it did bother me in this particular episode. Now, moving on, my second annoyance, and this one is definitely a nitpick, but some of the animation, or maybe it's just more of some of the poses some of the characters take, was just bizarre. Like, not even necessarily just like, you know, a silly pose, but like some of the motion, I don't know, just some of the ways they moved just seemed bizarre and weird, and I don't know, maybe it's just part of what it has, you know, it is a kid's show, so, you know, they're going to do some goofy and silly things from time to time, but I think especially when Steven was in the van with his dad, and like he's just making, like, if every pork chop were perfect, we couldn't have hot dogs, or something along those lines. It just felt off and weird to me. It's like, it definitely gave me a eyebrow raise moment, if you want to call it that. But yeah, so my second nitpick of the episode would be just some of the strange animations slash poses some of the characters take. And I think there was something else I was going to talk about in the annoyances, but I have now forgotten what it is. So yeah, oh well, so much for that. Now, moving on. Well, before I move on, if you have any other annoyances with this episode that you'd like to voice, again, let me know in the comments down below. I keep getting ready to say the description, but no, I write the description, you write the comments. So yes, leave some of your favorites and annoyances about this episode in the description down below. Now, moving on, the track of the episode, and I don't know if this is going to be something that I'll be able to do for every episode, necessarily. I guess we'll see as it moves on, but I honestly really liked the part where Steven played his dad's old album and the song Let Me Drive My Van Into Your Heart played. Now, admittedly, the singing voice is not always that great, especially as it goes on and the music gets more intense. But there's just something about the song that it worked well with everything that was going on. And the way that Greg, or is it Greg? Yeah, Greg Universe. I keep wanting to say Gary. The way Greg reacted when Steven pulled out his album, like he blushed and he was embarrassed and thought it was silly that Steven would want to listen to it. But just, there's something about the song that just really, really worked for me, and I liked that a lot. So yeah, track of the episode was Let Me Drive My Van Into Your Heart. Now, as for the quote of the episode, this may be rather obvious, but it's, if every pork chop were perfect, we wouldn't have hot dogs. And I do remember what my annoyance earlier was. It's that I feel like that was repeated few too many times to where the part where it got a bit annoying, which was weird considering it's an 11-minute episode, something about that approximate length. But the quote itself, it has to do with the fact that it is what activated the laser light cannon. And I realized this later, that is what made the laser light cannon glow when Steven was looking for it in the storage locker, was when he said that specific phrase. So, I can only assume that because of the love that Rose had for Greg, that she took on some of his phrases, perhaps it's like, or at least this one phrase, to activate her powerful weapon. Now, I can't remember if Greg says it out loud or not near the cannon, so I don't know if like him saying it could have activated the cannon, but the fact that Steven did, and he has the Rose Jewel, I guess, gave up, however it works. But basically, since he had the gem, if that's what enabled him to do it, it's a combination of both the mother and the father coming together, and it's just that love working together. Or it maybe, I wonder if it could have been any other phrase, like another phrase that Greg uses often that we'll maybe figure out as the show goes on. I don't know. In fact, I'm just kind of saying things off the top of my head here, but while I'm saying that, it does make a bit of sense. At least to me it does. So yeah, again, the quote of the episode, if every pork chop were perfect, we wouldn't have hot dogs. And because of the way, although repeated way too often, because of its importance in this episode. And now, as for my theory, and this is sort of for the show overall, not necessarily having to do with the story, but the show, and that is that I feel like music is going to be a very prominent aspect of this show. They may not have like specific songs every episode, like they had the Let Me Drive My Van Into Your Heart for this one, but I have a feeling that a lot of episodes will just have a lot of music will play a lot of importance, whether it's being played or just it's the theme music being played, the music being played while the show is going on. So yeah, that's my theory as far as it goes anyway. That's, you know, if you're a person that's already watched the show quite a bit, let me know if that's the case, because, you know, I actually really like that theme. If that's one of the things they're going to go with, is that music will play a rather prominent part in the show. I wouldn't exactly consider it spoilers if you say yes or no to that. So, yeah. Now, as for my overall thoughts on this episode, I liked it. I thought it was enjoyable. Again, we got to meet Greg Universe. We got to see or learn a little bit, like an infuriatingly small amount, about the relationship between Greg and Rose, and she apparently lost her physical form so that Steven could be born. I don't know. But although it had some frustrating elements for me, I really did like the episode, and I'm looking forward to watching the next one. And I have a feeling that with the rest of these going forward, I'm going to record these almost immediately after I watch the episodes, especially since they're so short. That way I can have everything still fresh on my mind. And the next episode will actually be Cheeseburger Backpack. And again, it's a kid's show, so gotta expect silly things like the title there, but yeah, don't really know what to expect from the show at this point. So yeah, we'll be moving on to episode 3, Cheeseburger Backpack, next time. And until then, everyone, hopefully I will have ordered my Steven Universe shirt by then. I doubt I will have it. But yeah, until next time, everyone, I'm Papa Ken. I'll see you later.